It is now 7:32. I call this meeting of the RTM Finance and Budget Committee to order. Mac, do you want to call yours to order at the same time?
Yes, at this time we call the Public Health and Safety meeting to order. Thank you.
If Public Health and Safety can wait for 2 minutes, because Ed is on vacation, so we have one item that I'd like to do with him first, and that is discuss and take action on Tilly Pond special appropriation for $21,500. Ed, do you want to quickly give a description of what it is, and then we can have it, if there's any questions, go that way. Ed, I give it to you.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay, Jack?
Perfect.
Okay. First of all, thank you for putting me up front. Obviously, this is an important project. I want to make sure that it's taken care of and represented properly. So we have flooding throughout town, of course, you're aware of, in July and September. The big storm in September happened to hit the downtown area significantly more than originally in July, but both of them were showed substantial damage throughout the area. We were approached by some of the business owners and property owners down in the downtown area, specifically 3 of them, to look at what we could do to improve the drainage down in that area. We had pulled out a previous study that was done back in 2007. I'll tell you, the folks that approached us was David Genovese. He had representation from Plenty Glassmeyer, and as we got this study going, Kip Coons, who owns a property on West Avenue, south of Tilly Pond, was also involved. 3 staples of our downtown area coming forward to put this public-private partnership together. As you see in the write-up, the study is about $43,000. They are picking up half of it, while the town has proposed to pick up, if approved, the other half at $21,500. Understanding the scope of work from the Goodwives study will start at the Goodwives River on Andrews Drive and head north. Now, not knowing the downtown drainage area, I'll try to walk you through how it goes. It does come up from underneath I-95, basically comes up behind the Corbin project and alongside 1020, crosses under the Post Road, goes up Brook Street, Grove Street, in between the 2 buildings where the fountain is, through the parking lot, and then to Squab Lane, where it then travels underneath the railroad bridge and is piped underneath the parking lot at Coons Lane, and then to Tilly Pond. Now, like I said previously, there was a study done back in 2007. They want to work on that study. There were some significant deficiencies when that study was done that showed that some of the piping down in the downtown area needed to be improved. David Genovese had brought to our attention that there's piping under under the Route 1 State Road that appears to be causing a backup also in the Brook Street and Grove Street area. And so we decided that we would put together this project. We have on board with us right now the consultant ready to do the work, but needs these funds to take care of it. Now, the engineer that we have selected to do this project has the knowledge of the downtown area, has previously done the study for the Corbin project, so basically has the lower third already designed, and understandably, since David has done the upgrades behind 1020 that goes all the way to Old Kings Highway South, those improvements are already done. Extending the study from their original calculations seems to be the most cost effective and beneficial for us as far as selecting a consultant to do this work. This company is well versed in this type of study, has done plenty of work for the town as either a primary consultant or a third party. The name of the company is Ty and Bond. As we move forward in this study, we all have a vested interest in the contract. The contract has all of the property owners and the town signing off on the contract. defining what portions are owned by which entity, making sure that the contract is solid as far as who is supposed to pay for what. I was asked previously if this type of study, if this is going to put the town in a position where we are committed to doing something else. I think that's a little premature without having the findings, but I'll tell you what I told the previous group that had asked. What we find is going to direct us on how to approach the downtown area, and having that information in hand is critical when you start to address who owns what, who's responsible for what, and who should be paying for what. And I think having this information first is critical. And I think, trying to divide who's going to be paying for what before we have the study done, I think is a little, like I say, premature. I don't think I have any other information. I think the storm sizes that we are going to look at are significant in size. I did ask them to go up to a 100-year storm to see if there's any flooding implications that we should be looking at with FEMA later, so that we're not going back and doing it twice. But I think that's important too. So I think the final piece is, hello?
Yep.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. And I think the final piece is this project is delivery into about 4 to 6 months based on the findings and when we get them started on it, because they are doing quite a few other projects, but this one they said that they would move quickly on.
Well,
here to answer any questions.
Yeah, I do want to add, in reviewing the original resolution that came to the RTM, I did do some modification, specifically stating that the private parties will be paying the vendor directly. I still would have put that in, but I understand why there is not a major concern when you just mentioned the 3 names of who the other 3 private parties are. I didn't know who they were. Is there any questions for Ed? No hands? All right, can F&B please unmute itself? I need somebody to move the motion. So who's going to move it?
I'll move it.
Mark, will move it. Do I have a second? I have Louisa.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. And I need my glasses. All right. Are there any no votes? Hearing none. Are there any abstentions? Hearing none. I'm going to assume that passes unanimously. I'm just going to do this other thing real quick, Ed. I don't really want to get into it because I thought enough was spent at the Board of Finance. There is an item for Gorham Pond. Some preliminary work is going to be done for about $14,000 out of Ed's existing budget. There is a question. The Gorham Pond Bridge and tidal gates are part of a 100-year lease that we were paying 1 penny a year for, and it's on deeded property. You can imagine 100 years later, some of that property and whose has it may have changed a bit. So Wayne is investigating who is the current owners on this current 100-year lease that we believe may be expiring in 2025. There may have been an earlier one, but since there's a subsequent one there. The Board of Finance tabled it until we have some knowledge on it. The dam needs to be repaired based upon the storms. Because you have tidal gates there, the dam is necessary for the tidal gates, and we're responsible for the maintenance of the tidal gates as well as the bridge. So that's the status on it. That will be investigated, and it will eventually come back to us. And really, we're not going to have any additional conversation on it because they spent enough time at the Board of Finance discussing it ahead of time. So does that give a good wrap up on it, Ed?
Yeah, Jack, and I appreciate you giving the cap on it too. I had a public works committee meeting the other night, and they asked the same questions, and I felt a little awkward only because I think it needs us to find some information, like you pointed out. So as soon as we have that information, I'll be coming back to the boards with the with appropriate findings and finding how we're going to move forward with this. But we are doing the temporary. It was supposed to be done this week, and I'm supposed to check in with Darren tomorrow, see how it's going. But yeah, we're in a position right now waiting on findings from our town attorney.
So with that, I'm going to bid Ed adieu, who's actually on vacation and came to our meeting, although he was on vacation, which is why we did him first, so he can now go back and enjoy the rest of the time with his family. Ed, thank you.
Jack, thanks very much, and your committee also. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, Kate, are you back on?
Yeah, I didn't leave.
Okay. We're going to take I need a motion to take action on the town hall union contract. And remember, we are voting not to reject as opposed to voting to accept. So can I have a motion on that action to discuss and take action on town hall union contract?
I vote to accept.
Okay, so we need a second. Mark seconds. Okay. Do you want to do the same on yours and Mac?
Sure. Can I have a motion to accept the discussion of the resolution? Got
So
Penny,
moved.
Penny and Jim.
Okay. So I can read what Kate wrote, or I can just ask Kate to give us an overview of the contract, which is a heck of a lot easier for me.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. The wage increases. Actually, let me say this contract is very similar in many respects to the one that you approved about a year ago for the Public Works Union. So the wage increases retroactive to July 1 of 21, 2.25, July 1, 22, 2.25, and July 1, 23, 2.5. The first 2 years are about the average settlements statewide. The third year is higher than the average statewide, and that we agreed to that because they agreed to move to a defined contribution pension plan for new hires. So we'll talk about that a little bit after. Medical changes, July 1 of 22, the premium share goes up to 10%, goes up another 0.5% July 1, 23, and then another 0.5% on June 30, 24, which is the last day of the contract. The purpose behind that is so that, as often happens in contract negotiations, we don't have a settlement by the date that the contract expires. This ensures that they will have had an increase for that time period. As I said before, this union agreed to a defined contribution plan for new hires. And that plan calls for a 5% employee contribution, a 5% employer match, and 5-year cliff vesting, meaning that the employees are entitled to the town's share after 5 years of service. This contract did have a lot of new language in it related to the dispatchers. Now that we have we're up to 9 dispatchers, we had to address issues related to overtime. With a fully civilianized dispatch center, the idea was that we would no longer be having officers in there, so we had to address what would happen with overtime, with some mandatory callback. We had to address how holidays and vacations would be handled with them. So there was quite a bit of language added to the contract relative to the dispatchers.
No.
That's the basic overview.
I did want to add a couple of things. Even this existing contract had the same language that on June 30th, the healthcare premium increased. And I
Yeah.
think that's extremely smart because, as Kate said, this contract is actually a little bit late. And that way this moves forward with the appropriate healthcare. So that was great. There is at least one person already on the defined contribution. That was I believe, a retired police officer who is now a civilian dispatch and can be contributing to his old pension while he's drawing on it at the same time. But it's good that we get this done because as soon as there are a couple of job openings here, and if we can hold off to a little bit after this contract is signed, they're all on defined benefit.
Defined
I'm joking
contribution.
about that. I'm sorry?
They're all on defined contribution.
Yes. So I'm joking a little bit about that because it's more important to fill the roles. Are there any questions for Kate? Let me just say, Kate, if I'm not mistaken, there's about 30 employees, 9 of which are civilian dispatch.
I think it's closer to 40, but yes,
Okay, so
nine
it would
civilian
be
dispatch.
30, and then the 9 civilian dispatch.
Yep.
Okay, right. Okay.
Kate, how does the budget fall with the police dispatchers? Is it under the police budget? Is it under the town?
So within the police budget, there's a section called communications, and that's where you see the dispatchers.
Okay. Thank you. Jim?
Jack? Yeah, Kate, 2 questions. Who was represented in this particular bargaining unit? What part of the employees? You said it was not Public Works like last year, but who are these folks? Not by name, obviously, just job title.
So it ranges all your clerical or administrative employees in the town hall. Then you have some of the higher level skilled employees that are not at the assistant department head level. So, like an assistant tax collector, the zoning enforcement officer, environmental protection officer, and then the dispatchers, obviously, the building inspectors, the custodians at the police department and the fleet maintainer at the police department are part of this union, though you might have expected them to be in Public Works. They're actually in this union. So it is a wide variety.
And the other question I have is, this is the first contract to codify the 4-day work week, the modified work schedule, as you call it.
Yes.
And if there were an evaluation ever made of maybe that has not delivered on the services people were hoping, how hard would it be to get people back on a 5-day work week?
Well, we'd have to negotiate that. So this is the first where it's codified in the body of the contract, but the agreement with the union goes back earlier to 2021. I'm sorry, 2020. So we'd have to negotiate it. And, that could mean any number of things.
Thank you.
Any other questions? F&B, are we ready to vote?
Jack, I have one question.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
These increases are tied to the base. Does this contract have step type increases associated with it?
It does. The grid basically is what goes up. This used to be a more mature union. Adding in the dispatchers, we do have it has skewed a little bit downward. But right now, over a third of the members are at the top step, and by the end of the contract, over 40% of the members would be at the top step. So, the cost overall is from the wages is about 3.7, assuming no changes.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Mark. So,
Jack, are you going to go ahead and vote now?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think what we'll do is
and-
then Do you want us to peel off then and we'll go to our own meeting?
If you have other things to discuss, I don't care if you vote now as well. It's up to you.
I think we'd like to discuss it because we do have our
Okay.
own meeting. So I think we'll just go ahead and semi-adjourn and then go back to our other meeting.
Okay, why don't you do your interim adjournment?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I move to temporarily adjourn this meeting and reconvene on our Zoom call. Do I have a second?
Second to go into recess.
Okay, do I have any objections? Any abstentions? So I guess we're all in favor, so we'll go ahead and sign off here. Thanks, Jack. Thanks so much.
I do want to add one other thing. I always enjoyed recess, but go ahead.
Carry on, Grandpa. Thanks. Congrats, Mazel tov.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready to vote, or are there any other questions? Seeing none, can we unmute just so that if there are any no votes, somebody can identify themselves? Are there any no votes? Are there any abstentions? Seeing none, we vote unanimously not to reject. Okay. I want to go over the next one real quick.
Do you need me for
I'll
anything
try and
else,
do it.
Jack?
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind hanging out for two more, I'm going to try and do it real quick, and I apologize.
Okay.
But there's a discuss and take action on a special appropriation for backstop for $11,000. Do I have somebody moving it? Mark moves it. Do I have a second? James, I have a second. Okay, I'm going to try and give a description of what's going on at, I believe it's homeschool. The backstop is about 25 years old. It doesn't have the same overhang that it's supposed to most to have now. It's also further away from home plate than is customary or standard. So what's been happening is balls have been fouled off going into a neighbor's yard. It's a new neighbor, but they have a 2 to 3 year old, and they're worried that if this continues and they're out in the backyard playing, the 2 to 3 year old can be hit by a baseball, hardball. So
Jack, just a quick correction. It's Bakerfield.
a Bakerfield. Sorry, thank you. So Pam met with the folks from the baseball league. They went and they did a design. This looks like it will resolve the situation. It's going to be closer to home plate, have a greater overhang, which is usually what I was used to when I played baseball. And that should hopefully stop the balls going. So the cost of this is $11,000. Board of Finance reviewed, and it's coming to us to be taken out of the general fund. Does that give a good description of it, Kate? Okay. Are there any questions on this? Iris?
Two things. Is this, if it doesn't work, do we have to still do anything else for these people? Like, what's our liability for doing this and the balls, and in the context of that, does this set a precedent that because someone complained to the town about something and then we fixed it? I mean, how does that legally involve,
I appreciate the questions. I think they're very good questions, and I'm not sure that it's something that should be discussed in open session by me. I think it's a question you might wish to discuss with the town council.
Okay. I get it. I understand why you don't want to answer. I do. I feel like I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I just am, lots of people complain about lots of things and we don't just go build a backstop for them.
Well, I would agree with you, Iris, except this backstop's about 20, 25 years old. So,
Okay, and I'm not stopping the backstop. I'm just curious as to what
Yeah.
happens if these doesn't satisfy the neighbors.
so
Are we obligating ourselves to do more? And
Also, Jack, I think this backstop is closer to adjoining property than any other Little League backstop in town. If you know Baker Field, it's
was that, I'm sorry, I did not catch who was talking at the time.
it's Barry.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I was looking, so it sounded like your voice. I just wasn't sure. Thank you, Barry. Yeah, I can't answer those questions. What I think it was is that this has been looked at. It looks like it should resolve it. But the other fields tend to have newer equipment and are in standard. This was out of what the current standard is for where a backstop should be and the overhang of a backstop
Right.
based upon the current requirements. So that's where I think it's different than somebody else. If we just put a new backstop and we're having problems with it, I don't think we go and buy another backstop for there. We look for other solutions that we might be able to have. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to replacing a 25-year-old backstop. I just want to make sure that someone thought these questions through. And
I think the key thing is if it's being brought up to code or below code, actually that's where the actual liability may lay, the bigger liability there, because a failure to meet a code or some type of standard in itself creates almost a de facto negligent situation. So
okay,
if it's bringing up the code, I think that's probably what we want to focus on.
okay.
I'm glad we have some attorneys here because of not being one, I could not have said that as appropriately and, you know. Thank you, Peter.
Awesome.
Are we ready? Are there any other questions or are we ready to vote on this? Okay. Do I have any no votes? Nobody turning on their mics or waving at me. I think I'm in good shape. Any abstentions? Seeing none, this passes unanimous. Okay. We're going to go to the library, and I thought Kira was here. Is she still here? Yes, she is.
Hi there.
Hello, Kira.
Hi, good evening. Thank you.
I just want, before we get started, and Kate's here, so Kate can leave after this. I need Kate to confirm that currently our own snow plowing is rather tight, and we actually go and hire out to accomplish certain things on our own. So I know that was one of the questions we asked. And so rather than it coming from my mouth, which is not as authoritative as Kate, I
That's
thought
correct, Jack.
we might have Kate confirm that.
Yeah. The town crew does not have the capacity to add this to their responsibilities at this time.
Thank you, Kate.
Do we have any pending or accepted or our what we call requests for bids on this? I mean, how much would it cost to contract out?
Before we go there,
Yep.
Can we have Kira, can we move the item, have Kira do
Absolutely.
it? I just wanted that one thing so that with that, we can now enjoy the rest of her evening from a very long day. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Rather
Good night.
night. Yeah, I just did that so because Kate had mentioned that in another meeting. And so I just wanted her to reiterate that if people had not gone and watched the Board of Selectmen meeting. So now we have to discuss and take action on a special appropriation increasing the library grant for $38,000 for the purchase of a truck and snow equipment. I will say one of the things that we had is I asked Jenny, who's at a conference, and Jenny and I put together a model that basically looked at what would be the minimum amount for the break even between snow removal and the cost of the truck plus maintenance and overtime of what was going on. And the number came out for total cost of about $7,200 a year. So I'm less interested that potentially the snow removal is $30,000. All it has to be is $7,200 plus the cost of any rentals to move things out from the library to the dump, plus the cost of vehicles to move anything from if they're setting up something at the Wednesday vegetable open market, or if they're doing another program. So I just wanted to set that out there because that's something we did to try and come out is what would the minimum be? And having moved things around for my family quite frequently, I will tell you that for 100 miles, you can rent a U-Haul van or a truck, but it's $100 a day, not counting insurance. So if they're doing 24 dump runs, that would be $2,400 if they did not have this truck. So with that, Kara, please give your presentation.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jack, and good evening, everyone. So as I mentioned when I spoke before the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, the library really does not have a habit or a history of going to the town to ask for capital expenditures. Part of the public-private partnership we have is generally that capital expenses are things that our friends fund. However, back in 2012, round about then, the library was seeing particularly the snow removal really inch up. And the former director, Alan Gray, realized that we could do the snow removal and some of these other things that we're talking about much cheaper by not outsourcing these sorts of services. And he put a proposal before the town, like we are now, saying, we can eliminate a fairly substantial operating expense that's part of our annual budget that we get the town grant, part of that, and instead do this capital project, get this truck, outfit it with the equipment that we need, and then we have our full-time staff member, Vic, our building engineer, who can perform these services. And since then, we've seen our building maintenance budget actually decrease by about 15% in the ensuing years. So as I mentioned in the proposal, we use it for snow and ice removal, salting, obviously all through the winter months. During the more temperate months, from about May through October, we participate in the beautification commissions, the hanging flower baskets all around town. So we have about 36 of those, and they have to be watered pretty much every day. And believe it or not, it takes almost 5 minutes a basket. So it takes quite a while. And we use the truck. Vic gets there in the morning. He also waters the police department's baskets as well while he's at it. And as Jack mentioned, we use the truck fairly often for dump runs. We do not have our own dumpster. Nielsen's is very nice to let us share their dumpster over in their parking lot, but we can't fill it up with a lot of things. So anytime we're getting rid of large items or lots of materials that we're deaccessioning, we do have to do a dump run, and instead of having a carting service do that, Vic loads up the flatbed in the truck and hauls it away. And in addition, we use the truck for bringing equipment, things like the tents. We have these large folding tables, chairs, sometimes arts and crafts materials, easels, paint, depending on what we're doing. Sometimes we'll do story times in the park or at the beach for the little kids, or art programs, or we'll go to one of the assisted living facilities and set up a table, or the farmer's market, and so on. That's really the purpose of the truck, and we really are trying to find the most cost-effective way to do all of these things at the least impact in terms of the budget. And we believe that getting a new truck, outfitting it with the equipment that we need over the long run will be much more cost-effective. And I am happy to take any of your questions, and I thank you for your time.
So, do we have questions for Kara? Iris?
And why are you coming to the town and not the Friends, or doing a share with the Friends and the town? Is that
So
I mean, I
normally,
recognize it saves us operating costs. I get that part of it, but
so that would be, that would be moving those budget lines from the town budget for the operational maintenance, sort of ongoing maintenance of the library, to the Friends budget. So if the Friends were to take this on, that would mean an impact in terms of materials we could buy, programs that we could put on, and we much rather, when it comes to maintenance, that's sort of the public-private partnership. The funds we get from the town are very limited. Staffing, benefits, and core operations. So the lights and the electricity and the landscape, and just the things that sort of keep the physical building operational, and the staff to run it. Whereas the Friends really focus on all of the stuff, our books and our materials and the ebooks and all the programs and events. And that's really where we focus our Friends operating budget. Now, the Friends do fund capital projects over the last few years. Over the last 2 years, they funded about $1.2 million in capital projects, everything from, we had to update the geothermal, a new materials handling system, and we're expecting at least another probably 2.3 million over the next few years, from everything from just repairs and replacements that are large projects that we would not go to the town for.
and so we would also then assume that in 8 years you would be coming back for another truck.
I mean, potentially. I think, I would love to see if we can get this truck to stretch a little further. I was looking at some industry averages, and it looks like the average truck that's used in the way that we use this lasts from 7 to 10 years. So we kind of fall in that range. But, I would love to work with Vic and maybe even, the folks at Public Works to figure out how do we stretch that? Can we get it to 10 or 11? And it might be a matter of, just better maintenance and upkeep. I know that the salt and the corrosion from the kicking up of the salt is usually what contributes to how hard these trucks, the abuse. It's mostly from that. So maybe we need to just get it coated on the undercoat or something to help it last a little bit longer.
Well, I'm also
I
going to
understand
add
it.
that.
I mean, there'll be wear and tear. I just was saying that this would be seen as an ongoing expense of the town to replace this vehicle when and if it ever needs to be replaced again.
Yeah, I think 7 to 10 years is probably fair.
I do want to add one other thing here, just to make this clear, because I don't think Kara was clear on this. This is the second truck that the town is purchasing. We're not setting precedent. The Board of Finance set precedent with this approximately 8 years ago. So that's number one. Number two, I've mentioned to Kara and to Milan that not conditional upon, but as part of this, I'd like them to start to record the hours that the truck is running. Because if we look at our police cars, if we're looking at our public works vehicles, if we're looking at the vehicles that we have at the Board of Ed, especially since this one idles a lot, similar to the police, that it's definitely something that we should be more interested in what the hours run that it's run as opposed to the mileage. Because mileage is going to be low. We find that with police cars, the mileage is low. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Jack. Kira, I think, first of all, I appreciate the effort the library has put forth to try to save on operating expenses by using a vehicle to do all these different roles that you described. The wear and tear on the truck, it occurs to me, and I think you touched on this, it would be, perhaps there can be a relationship with Public Works. I expect that salt, we installed wash bins, I think they're called, wash bays. And the reason that was done is to extend the life of the fleet of Public Works vehicles. And it occurs to me that your vehicle could very well benefit from that for very little marginal cost and save the town by extending the life even 1 year. That's a material savings to your capital budget or our capital.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, because from all, I mean, I'm not an expert in trucks or plowing necessarily, but from what I understand and what Vic has told me, you know, getting it regularly washed, especially that underside, is critical to prevent that corrosion.
Yep. Thank you.
Mark, I think that's a great idea. Later on tonight or tomorrow morning, I'm going to pass that idea on. I'll copy Kara, but I'll pass it on to Ed, where I'll get another message that he's on vacation. And
wait till he's back, Jack.
and but also to Kate, that this is something that I think would discuss and also potentially extend the life. So therefore, it's beneficial to the town to work something out between the library and that. I think that's a great idea. Any other questions?
Yeah, I saw the photos that you sent us about the previous truck, and it looked in pretty bad shape after all these years. There's no residual value on giving that truck away or anything that.
I don't know if there is, but I know that we talked about whatever trade-in value there is, we'll either put it towards the purchase of the new truck, or if there's any, you know, surplus, we would just give that back to the town, as we do with any surplus.
Okay.
Yeah, even if it's, you know, scrap metal, I don't know what it might be worth.
Right. The resulting value of that truck is either going to reduce the purchase price of the $38,000, which hence, you know, they will be returning to us on this. This is very specific. They're getting $38,000 solely for a truck. If the truck costs $37,000, $1,000 comes back to us. If it's salvage, the salvage comes back to us.
Okay, perfect.
And it could also be the sale of the plow and the salting equipment as well. So, but yes. Any other questions? Are we ready to vote? I put on my glasses so I can see. Are there any no votes? Are there any abstentions? I'd like to hear, like, at least show a hand. Is everybody in favor of this? Okay, thank you.
Well,
I did that because we did have some discussion on this before, and I want to be able to know that I'm not just pushing this through. Kira, thank you very much.
Thank
you. We're now.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good night.
thank you.
Thanks, Kira. Thank you for everything you guys do at the library. Also, we really do appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
You too. Okay. We're once again back to ARPA, and being that we have the sole RTM representative in Martha, similar to what I did on the union contract, I'm just handing this part of the meeting over to Martha to what's going on, what we have, and I can help on some next steps if necessary. Martha, all
Okay.
yours.
Well, I sent earlier this evening a list of the ARPA proposed expenditure, the ARPA committee proposed expenditure areas. And this list of projects will now go before the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and ultimately the RTM for vetting and approval. The list contains about $6.3 million in projects, but the town expects to receive a little over $6.4 million, so there's about a $100,000 contingency built into this list. And my understanding is that if we complete a project for less than the funds allocated to it, the remaining funds can be redirected to another area as long as this is done or specified, the area is specified before December 2024. As you can see, the funds encompass several expenditure areas: health, for replenishing health supplies, and some money to cover the cost of vaccinating people, and some money with the assumption that going forward we will have to hold some additional vaccination clinics. The largest share of this money, about $3.8 million, is devoted to infrastructure, which covers sanitary sewers and drainage projects. There's an everything else category, which falls under pretty much the lost income part of ARPA. And it includes $577,000 for 11 capital projects that appeared on this year's proposed budget and which have already been approved by the Board of Selectmen. But the decision was made to ask that these be funded by ARPA so as to, ameliorate, I guess, the whatever the tax increase will be. There's another, and I didn't double check my numbers, but there's over $1 million for capital projects that were deferred by the town administrator this year or appear in the 6-year capital plan. And I should note that the committee decided to institute a $50,000 minimum threshold for projects, $50,000 and above. So anything less than $50,000 in the way of capital projects, those that were deferred or in the 6-year plan, don't appear, except there's some miscellaneous expenditures. We put in $10,000 for picnic tables, which were heavily used during the pandemic, and there certainly are some around town that definitely need replacing. I think we have some money in there for water fountains, and then one member asked specifically for $10,000 for computer instruction and tablets at the senior center. There's another $450,000 for nonprofits in such areas as mental health and food insecurity. And the nonprofits would have to go through the town's grant process to receive these ARPA funds. So, the grant process would be utilized in determining how much of these funds would be distributed and to whom. And lastly, there's $75,000 for emergency assistance. These funds would be administered by the town's Human Resource Services Department to cover such things as rent and utility costs, which are a direct result of COVID and job loss. And I'll leave it at that for now. Oh, and I should say, just for the public, if you want to see this list, and I did send it to all of you, go to the town webpage, and under government, you click on other committees and agencies. And once you do that, you'll see the ARPA committee on the left-hand side. If you click on that, you'll find the list of the recommended project list. Because I know I had a little bit of difficulty in finding where the committee was located.
This is partially to Mark and Peter on rules. I'm going to be, the way I look at ARPA, and Kate and I were actually talking a little bit about this before the meeting started. We should view ARPA as if we're doing the capital vote at our annual budget meeting. So it's a big dollar amount for which I'm going to be recommending that F&B take the lead on. And then we'll deal with the areas that we're responsible for. There's a couple for the first selectman that do enhancements to the auditorium and some of the rooms, as an example. And it doesn't really fit into anybody else's committee. But then Public Works, Public Health and Safety on the health issues and some of the grants. I believe the drone is, no, the drone didn't make it in there from that.
No, it's in there.
It is this, yeah, that's the other 50 that made it in there. So they'll report on their little sections and then we'll vote on the total amount, including the contingency. So I just wanted to explain what's going on. Martha made a suggestion to Kate, and Kate thought it was a great idea. The one-page write-up that we get on all capital projects will have a write-up. Kate's still gathering some of them. Some of them have more robust write-ups on what they are. And yet some of them, when we're talking about some of the public works stuff, where we're talking about 2024 doing a sewer project or something, we can say what we want, but obviously it's not going to have the same definition as some of the other projects that have made the list. So as soon as Kate has those, she will be sending them around, which I think is, I want to thank Martha for making that suggestion. And I want to thank Kate, who's not here anymore, on the meeting, thinking that was a good idea, moving that forward. But as soon as I get them, we will be distributing them to not only this committee, but to the other committees. Are there any questions for Martha?
Martha, is there like a higher government agency that looks at our list and says, yes, your projects all fit within the definition? Is that already done, or is that to be done?
No,
or?
I understand. I understand that I think towns of our size have to submit a report once a year. I think, I may not be remembering this correctly, about how they wish, they've identified where they're going to spend the money. And I can't tell you, the finance director, I think, is going to be in charge of that. I can't tell you to whom they actually submit the report. But
I guess my question is, there a danger of us doing a project and then somebody come back and saying, oh, you really can't do that project because it doesn't.
Remember, there's a loss of income category, and towns our size can spend up to 10 million. And in our case, our award is only 6.14. So the means we could actually spend 6.4 million on, quote, loss of income, which can cover anything that would be in a budget. And so
this was just a, I didn't.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't know the specific details, but reports must be submitted to certain government bodies. I assume first at the state level, but I don't, beyond that, I don't know the details. But I think that's something to the town administrator and the finance director are aware of and probably could speak to.
Iris, I will send another email to Kate later tonight and copy Jen and see if I can get an answer to that and then pass it around to the committee.
Okay, I mean,
I'm going to probably need to
all
know
sound like
that.
wonderful projects. I just didn't know who was the final authority on, can we do them or not? That kind of thing. I don't have a.
No, I think it's good, especially if we're going to be the committee introducing it. It's probably something that we should have in the report. That we do a report, it goes here. And here's who's doing that report. So I think that's a great question. Thank you. Any other questions for Martha?
Just one clarification, Martha. I heard you mention it could have been used for any loss of income. Does that mean, in theory, it could have been applied to the general fund? Not advocating for that, just curious.
Well, repeat the last part of your question. I didn't quite catch it.
Sure.
Does that mean
It could have been applied to the general fund for loss of income from revenues, as opposed to what we're doing here, is capital projects. In theory, could it have been applied to loss of income side of the
you could fund part of your budget, you know, with these funds? I mean, it's a very loose category. Originally, you did not have that deduction up to 10 million. There was a specific formula that you had to apply, and even under that, I understand, and I don't know the level, but we had some quote loss of income, but it was, you know, we couldn't have spent up to 6.4 in that form. But now with that catch-all of 10 million, it's really pretty loosey-goosey. If you look at projects around other towns, they've spent it on all kinds of things.
Thank you.
But the majority of funds are really, we're hoping will go towards water, which is specified water infrastructure, which is specified within, you know, the ARPA regulations. So
It's something that we've needed to do for some time. I do think, if I'm not mistaken, do you recall, I think Norwalk got something in the neighborhood of about 39 million. So
yeah,
they're under a slightly different, but like anything on income, I think the only area, and you know, Monica, Jen, and Kate will probably hate me for saying this, but I believe the only area that we probably got took a real hit on income is in the parking fund, because people weren't commuting into the city. Although what we did find is, and they just discussed this at the Board of Finance, for what we budgeted in the parking fund for the, you know, the annual parking sticker, that actually people were buying, no different pandemic or no pandemic. And I think it's, you know, I had that for years when I was commuting into the city, but you don't give that up, because it could be another 5 years before you get back to having one. So, you know, that's one of the, I think you put it in your will for inheritance to your children or something.
which also goes to show it's very price.
To be fair, Jack, none of us knew that this pandemic was going to be a rolling pandemic in January. Or actually, you renew in November, I think, is when you renew.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
No, I think what they did is, you're absolutely right. I'm not challenging what we budgeted for. It was just interesting that Jen said, hey, we budgeted for this, and we found out why. So when they're preparing the parking fund for this year, they made sure that they accounted for that and that. But, you know, the parking is a separate fund. So, but that's it. I mean, I think that, you know, for the rest of this stuff, we've actually may have benefited, because the park and rec budget, again, is the revenue is like far above budget. The expenses corresponding to those revenue, once again, in June, we're going to have to make an appropriation to increase expenses and offset their revenue. And because of this happening 2 years in a row, we've changed the accounting. In the past, they used to run it off the balance sheet and give a net number, and that wasn't really good. So that, if you remember, about 4 years ago, they started recording revenue, grossing up revenue on the revenue side and expense on the Board of Selectmen budget. And we're finding out the last 2 years that's not working. So what we'll talk about when we're talking about budget is that this year, for next year's budget, they've set up a special revenue fund where they have the expenses and the revenue going into that. And then at the end of the year, that gets closed out into the town revenue, and they've budgeted for that town, which sort of leads me into what's going on. I'll send out at least the copies. We're going to be, or I'm going to be at the beginning of the RTM meeting, initiate something that I think is a great idea. We vote on the budget, and then nobody else talks about what's going on in the financials other than our own committee, or nobody's reporting back to the RTM saying, hey, here's what you budgeted, here's what the 6 months looks like, here's what the 9 months look like, here's what year end looks like. So I'm going to be reporting very briefly on what the first 7 months of the Board of Ed budget looks like, and what the first 7 months of the town side budget, including the Board of Selectmen and the library. I have commentary from both Rich Rudel, who's looked at it, and Jen has looked at it. Now, she makes these reports. Rich does it monthly to the Board of Ed. Jen does it to the Board of Finance meeting. So it wasn't that difficult for me to gather this information and put it down, but I did ask them to verify it. And then we will be presenting what the two boards approved in their budget, comparing it to what they asked for the prior year. So I'm less interested in how we paid for capital last year, just what was requested from capital last year compared to what was requested to capital this year. We're doing this before the Board of Selectmen and Board of Ed present to the Board of Finance on March 1st. We're not making any category. We're not even modifying for the $570,000 of ARPA funds that are there. All I'm going to do is mention that here's the capital, but it's just a starting point because we don't know what's going to be bonded, what's going to be paid out of the capital reserve, or what's being paid out of ARPA, even though we now know what's paid out of ARPA. I will not be taking questions because the RTM meeting's long enough between asking things there, but I will have anybody who has questions, feel free to email me and I'll get it back. I'll send you the slides and the commentary out tomorrow, just so that you get a preview. I believe the RTM is only going to see the financials. The commentary I'm going to just be reading off of and not showing them on a slide or a screen. That takes care of that. The Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen budgets. Please, I will send out a schedule. I know Bill asked for it, but I'll send out a schedule again on when the Board of Finance will be discussing certain items. Please feel free to contact your what your feelings are on the budget areas that you've looked at with the Board of Finance representatives. Also, feel free to contact the corresponding RTM chair. So like if you had police, email Mac and see where they're going on it, or, civilian dispatch or health and safety, which would be Mac's area, or public works. Ralph was on the meeting earlier. He's the chair of public works. Mark and Martha, give Ralph a call and, go from there. As I said before, I was a little disappointed that the Board of Selectmen added things to their budget when this was already high. But, it is what it is. It's now going through the Board of Finance review, and I will be working with Jen and Kate on the town side and with Rich Rudel on the other side to go back to our initial premise that when Jim Palin, chair of the Board of Finance, said guidance was 2.5% for core business and 3% total for growth. Now, I wasn't looking at where the mill rate was supposed to be, that's what we were looking at, because again, we're gonna, the grand list went up by more than I've ever seen it go up, by 1.9%. That's generating a tremendous amount of revenue. You know, just take that amount of increase, multiply it times 70, and then multiply it times the existing mill rate, and that's telling you how much incremental revenue we are getting from just that growth. Yeah, just communicate, and I think we'll be fine on this. But I won't be working with them to identify that. I do have a belief that based upon some of the issues of, and I'm going to be mentioning this at the RTM meeting, I think if you look at some of the salary increases, some of the increases in in utilities, fuel costs, and then both the Board of Ed and Board of Selectmen have had increases, significant increases in their health care. I'm not sure they could have made 2.5% this year without doing significant cuts. So if you were just going to do ongoing business, I think they might have been over based upon the inflationary trends and what's going on in the marketplace, a greater than 2.5, but we're going to find out. So, and that's going to be part of our overall report when we do go back to the budget. But I will say that the budget is not done yet, and we'll wait to see what the what comes out of the finance, and please feel free to contact your counterparts. If you have any difficulty, let me know. Other than that, you know, go forth. Lastly, we did have, I believe Jenny sent out minutes. So do I have somebody to move the minutes? I don't put on my glasses.
Can I
get
just
it on
ask a question?
Sure.
I remember
Lisa,
now that we are looking at the playgrounds, and I remember now that I see that Cherry Lawn will be due 2 years from now, I remember there was an initiative that the parents we took 20 years ago to replace the playground, that it was in Cherry Lawn because it was all wooden and the kids got all the splinters, and we raise funds and a brick for our park, and there you see some of the bricks that parents were happy to contribute. Is this something that we can try to see if we can organize to reduce those budgets on those playgrounds for the 175 and the $500,000 coming, that we can share with people that I think will like to help?
Yes, I believe that the organization set up a 503c organization, Friends of Cherry Lawn. They raised a significant amount of money. I believe that at the end of the project, they still had $60,000, and rather than running the 503c on an annual basis and paying an accountant to do the filings in that, they made a gift to the town for those funds, and those funds have been used to improve Cherry Lawn subsequently. That when we did the cleanup of the when this committee did the cleanup of the reserve funds, that was one of the things that we came across. But I also believe that one or two of the members who helped organize the 503c are now sitting on the park commission, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, I think that for that, and also I know Monica at one time, when it's in the ARPA funds, there's about $170,000, $180,000 from McGuane's playground to do that. So I do believe that, you know, if we can get organized, or people so desire, that perhaps they can raise additional funds. I just don't know if what that group did, Louisa, and what you did and the rest of them did in raising funds for Cherry Lawn. I think it becomes a little bit difficult when somebody already knows that there's a certain amount of money allocated for a future playground to raise the equivalent funds.
Yeah.
But
Remember, there was no budget back then, so
yes,
the council does know.
but I would hope that maybe something is organized so that there's sufficient input. You know, I used to go to Cherry Lawn for the soccer, but my two of my grandkids actually go to Bakersfield and Cherry Lawn to playgrounds there. So I hang out there and I know what's there and that. So there's, to have people interested participating in the design and input, I think would be great. And, you know, if necessary, raising additional funds would be good as well.
Yeah. Okay, again, knowing that you will have already 500,000, then why bother?
Yeah, that's my concern as well. But it's something that has to be done, and since we can do it, it's using to improve the infrastructure of the town, and so
Okay.
that is where it is. I was hopeful that funds would be raised from McGuan, but that's also in the ARPA funds.
Yes, and give it to public works and real infrastructure in bad
Yeah,
shape.
this and Peter and I were talking about this earlier. Besides the number of people just volunteer hours and hours of work for so many different committees, communities, and other events, the town is, the only word I can say is blessed, because between the Darien Athletic Foundation, between the Darien Foundation, between people raising money for Weed Beach, for other teams that are done, other programs that are done for in the high school, and around the PTOs that do tremendous work for all of our schools and that. You know, if they weren't here, our budget would be a heck of a lot higher, and our taxes would be significantly higher. So, you know, we're very lucky as a community. So can we now go to the minutes and then we can wrap this up? I had Louisa, I had you moving. I have Barry as a second. Are there any no votes? Seeing none, are there any abstentions? So I'll just take it that we have unanimous on the outstanding minutes, which brings us to adjournment. I want to thank everybody for putting in the time today. This went a little bit over an hour, but we did have a tremendous amount of stuff, and we also were able to do a joint meeting with PH and S, which was helpful for them and to Kate. So do I have somebody moving for adjournment? I have Barry, and then James, I'm going to give you Iris. I already got you once today. With that, I'm just going to say that nobody's going to say no. Everybody say aye. Have a very pleasant week. See everybody next Monday.
Thank you, Jack.
Good night.
And thank you, Jack, for working so hard for all of us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jack.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Jack.